In the early 20th century, tensions were mounting between the nations of Europe. The world appeared headed in a dangerous direction, towards war. And in times of great anxiety, spiritual communities often search for deliverance. In 1908, a rumor began to spread among Theosophists. A powerful spiritual messenger was coming.
It had been foretold that there would be a new world teacher, a new Messiah, some person who would lead the world out of darkness. This was in the lineage and the tradition of the Christ, the Buddha, Krishna, Muhammad, great religious teachers who come at a time of darkness, who are able to help people through a deepened sense of what is important in life.
One afternoon in 1909, on a beach near Madras, India, a colleague of Besant's, Charles Leadbeater, spotted a group of young boys. It was believed that Leadbeater was clairvoyant, that he was capable of reading a person's spiritual energy. And there was one boy who stood out from the rest.
He saw in this young boy on the Bay of Bengal something that was very different from others. He saw a child with an aura that was very beautiful, and as he said later, had no hint of selfishness.
Although he was malnourished and weakened from malaria, Theosophists jubilantly anointed this unlikely 14-year-old the next Messiah. His name was Jiddu Krishnamurti. Despite skepticism among Theosophists, Annie Besant believed in Krishnamurti and took over his care and education. She moved him into the Theosophical headquarters. And in an effort to retain control over the boy, Besant went a step further. She legally adopted Krishnamurti.
She trained him in his role as the world teacher. Interestingly, her training incorporated that he would have spiritual development, but she also wanted him to be trained as a proper English gentleman. She wanted him to go to Oxford, because how could the world teacher actually not go to Oxford? She wanted him to learn to eat with utensils. She wanted him to dress more in Western clothes.
For 10 years, Annie Besant groomed Krishnamurti. Finally, in 1921, she decided it was time for him to assume his rightful place.
People throughout the world are seeking comfort, but not understanding.
Krishnamurti had grown into a capable, handsome, and charismatic young man. And like his adoptive mother, he spoke forcefully, simply, and passionately. Donations to the Theosophical Society flooded in, and the world press couldn't resist covering this unusual story.
The expectation of a Messiah always generates that excitement historically. It's actually a good way to attract people to a new movement. I'm not purporting that Annie Besant did this as a PR thing. I don't mean to imply that at all. But it would have had the effect of attracting more people to the Theosophical Society.
In private, Annie Besant looked after Krishnamurti as her adopted son. In public, as his devoted disciple, she was dedicated to him as her spiritual teacher.
I, who have known him from his childhood, who have watched his growth, see the manhood raised into divinity, offer myself to him as disciple, rejoicing to know that I can continue to serve in reverent devotion.
But as Krishnamurti matured, the bond between them was severely tested. He had grown uncomfortable with his role in the movement and felt he had become merely an icon placed on a pedestal. Just as Annie Besant had, as a young woman, rejected the role expected of her, Krishnamurti now rejected his.
Organizations cannot make you free or develop the inner man. No man from outside can make you free.
In 1929, to the surprise of everyone, Krishnamurti declared his intention to separate himself from Theosophy and go off on his own. Thousands of Theosophists who had come to depend on Krishnamurti's spiritual guidance were left on their own and devastated. For Annie Besant, the news was stunning. In private, she was shattered and confused. In public, Besant remained stoic and maintained her faith in Krishnamurti's divine wisdom.
I'm told by someone who was present that her immediate reaction was, "But you're my teacher, I will follow you." And he said, "No, you must stay with the society. You're the president. You do not leave."
Annie Besant listened, and she disagreed with him on a few points, but she also said that he now was her spiritual superior, and that when he was teaching something that she didn't understand, she would just sort of hold that and hope to grow into understanding at a later point. But she certainly considered him to be the world teacher for the rest of her life until her death.
Journeying from vicar's wife to spiritual leader, Annie Besant lived courageously and passionately. She brought attention to the working conditions of the poor, and she spoke out on such radical issues as birth control, Indian nationalism, and the brotherhood of man. The common thread was her compulsion to end the world's suffering and to seek spiritual enlightenment.
She actually wanted to change the world. I mean, she wanted to change society. She looked around and saw that a lot of people suffer. There's a lot of injustice. The powerful dominate the weak, and she wanted to alleviate that suffering.
Besant's greatest strength was her absolute courage. She was ready to defy authority and take the consequences, but she had the courage of her convictions.
In 1933, at the age of 85, Annie Besant died at the Theosophical headquarters in India. She asked that her grave be marked with the epitaph, "She tried to follow the truth."
I would say to those of you who are young today, look forward to a future full of nobler tasks that you may do, that we have left undone. Never forget that life can only be nobly inspired and rightly lived if you take it bravely and gallantly as a splendid adventure.